Disclaimer: if Harry Potter has a vision of J.K. Rowling, he may be having a metafictional crisis. If J.K. Rowling has a vision of Harry Potter, she gets all the money. Part of this chapter is quoted from Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. The next few days went smoothly. Saturday was a pleasant and uneventful Hogsmeade visit, and classes continued with little trouble except for the announcement on Monday that Professor Trelawney had been put on probation. Since Hermione had never had her as a teacher, and she reportedly wasn't very good, it was hard for her to care much. In the meantime, she set up her system of letters and decoy letters to her parents, and updated them on most of what was going on at Hogwarts. She did mention Dumbledore's army to them, but not by name, and not in great detail. It occurred to her that if her post was being monitored, other people's post might be too. Certainly Harry's and the Weasleys would be, but would Umbridge bother with anyone else? Susan Bones, probably, but people who were towing the line and not causing trouble? Hermione didn't think she'd bother. And if it got out that people thought their post was being monitored, and Umbridge really was doing it to only a few people, Hermione could be implicated in telling them very quickly. It was a conundrum that troubled her for some time, until she realized she could use Hogwarts' notorious rumor mill to her advantage. All she had to do was think like a normal teenage girl, like Mum said. She didn't approach any of the gossip mongers directly. That might be too easy to trace. Instead, she approached Susan first and told her the problem in broad strokes. They then approached Padma together, since Parvati had asked Hermione to recruit her to the DA. Padma was excited about the prospect to learn proper defense, and a little disappointed that they didn't come to her sooner. Hermione and Susan then dropped a few deliberately vague and speculative comments about their post being monitored in Padma's presence. Sure enough, Padma told Parvati, and just like that, the rumor was around the whole school by dinner time, with no one able to say where it came from, or whether it was true. Most probably thought it was a joke, but those in the know would know better. It seemed the perfect plan. Although, was it her imagination, or was Umbridge glaring at Hermione in particular at meals now, and not just Harry? She tried not to let it bother her. After all, Umbridge had plenty of other reasons to dislike her. Over the course of that week, Hermione spent much of her free time improving the Mathemagician's map, since the safety measures it contained were of the most immediate importance. She got the house elf quarters to show up pretty easily. The map was already receiving the data it needed for that from the wards. She just needed to tell it to draw them. The other missing areas of the map were harder. The Chamber of Secrets turned out to be unplottable. She found that out when she tried to physically draw it, and a magical force stopped her hand from making the pen strokes. The Room of Requirement turned out to be unplottable for a quite different reason. Apparently, as far as the wards were concerned, it literally didn't exist when it wasn't there, so there was nothing for the map to draw. In the end, she came up with an alternative solution. The map would simply monitor when a name dropped off the floor plan at those two locations, and write a list of names that were in the unplottable areas off to the side. With a few tweaks, she also got it to automatically open to the floor it was on, and improved the text interface some. The space above the Great Tower was still giving her headaches, though. The weird space that looked like bits of the rest of the castle jumbled together refused to register on the map, and it would take a protracted search of the anchor stones to figure out where it fit into the wards. Maybe it was a space that the monitoring runes couldn't mathematically handle. Anyway, she decided to just use the same off-the-map method there, and it was good enough for now. If only Harry's problems were that easy to solve. Harry was walking back to the castle from Quidditch practice on Tuesday when it happened. It started as a flare of pain in his scar, the strongest he had felt in months. He brushed it off in front of the team as having poked himself in the eye, but Ron could tell it wasn't that. "Was it your scar?" he said. Harry nodded. "Yeah, bad." He stumbled as he cringed again. But he can't be here, can he?" No, he's probably miles away. I think it's hurting because..." Harry felt a stab of pain like an ice pick being driven into his skull as he leaned against the wall. "Because he's angry," he grunted. Then he had a vague image of the world spinning and Ron shouting at him as he collapsed to the floor. He was in an ornate but dimly lit room. He heard a hissing sound and saw a bone-white wand in his hand, but it wasn't his hand. A man was cowering at his feet. "You did not retrieve it?" Harry heard himself say, except it wasn't his voice. Master," the cowering man said, "the door is guarded at all hours. Dumbledore's people are there all the time, and being caught inside there is even worse. Dumbledore couldn't even save his own man from the horrors."
"I have had enough of your excuses," he hissed. "Crucio!"
With another stab of pain, Harry was jolted back into his own body. He was lying on the floor. When did that happen? He blinked up into the light and saw Ron and Ginny and Hermione standing over him looking worried. How long had he been out? "Harry, what happened?" Ginny said frantically. I saw him," he whispered. "I saw Voldemort."
Where?"
she squeaked. Not here." He couldn't tell them that he had apparently seen the vision out of Voldemort's eyes. "Dunno. He was angry, furious. Something didn't go his way." With a lurch, he realized what the odd feeling he had felt weeks ago in Umbridge's office had been. It had been happiness. This time, though, it was anger. "How do you know, Harry?" Hermione asked. "I dunno. I saw it. He was torturing somebody. Hurts." "Come on, mate. We'll get you to the hospital wing," Ron said. "No," he groaned. "Need to see Dumbledore." "You can't wait any longer, Albus," Sirius insisted. He pounded his fist on the headmaster's desk. "Harry needs to start learning occlumency now. He's having visions of Voldemort, and Ginny says he's having recurring nightmares about a long, dark corridor that he can never get to the end of. Voldemort's already starting to exploit the link between them. Leaving it alone isn't working." "Sirius, you know we will have the same problem teaching Harry as before," Dumbledore said with his usual annoying calm. "Damn it, you told me you would do something if he started getting worse. Hell, I'd even take Snivellus teaching him over what we're doing now, which is jack squat." "I did have an idea for Severus to teach Harry. I fear it may not be the most effective possible method, but I believe it will hold the least risk for everyone involved, and if nothing else, Harry will at least be forewarned of Voldemort's tricks." "Then do it," Sirius demanded. "Just do something for the kid. He can't keep going on like this, or it's going to get a lot worse really fast." "Very well. I will speak to Severus and Harry." Harry wasn't sure which emotion was most appropriate at the moment. Amazement that Dumbledore had actually willingly called him up to his office for once. Confusion because Sirius was there. Worry because Snape was there. Or anger that Dumbledore still wouldn't look him in the eye. "You wanted to see me, Professor?" Harry said. "Yes, Harry," Dumbledore said, gazing fixedly at Sirius. "Please have a seat. There's something we must discuss with you." Harry sat. He wondered why they hadn't discussed whatever this was last time. He assumed it was because of his vision, but when he first reported the vision, Dumbledore just ran some kind of scan on him and asked some probing questions that eventually got him to admit he'd seen the vision from Voldemort's point of view. He still didn't know what that meant. "Your godfather," Dumbledore continued, "recently gave me an ultimatum regarding a measure we had been considering, but that I had hesitated to enact because of the difficulty of the task." "Harry," Sirius spoke, and Harry was pleased to see that he did look him in the eye. "These visions and moods you're getting from Voldemort, we're worried that he could use them to hurt you." "He's already hurting me," Harry said, rubbing his scar. "Yes, sorry, but we think that's mostly spillover, like he's focusing on other things. If he really turned his attention to hurting you, it could get a lot worse." Harry paled. He didn't realize the visions were that bad. "Now, we have good news and bad news," Sirius said. "The good news is that there's an obscure branch of magic called occlumency that can help you. It's the art of protecting the mind from intrusion, and it should help you shut Voldemort out. The bad news is that the only person who can teach it to you properly is Professor Snape." "Snape?" Harry's head spun around to look at the scowling potions master, and then to Dumbledore. "You can't be serious, Professor!" He glanced back at Sirius, but his godfather didn't make the obvious joke. "I'm afraid it was unavoidable, Harry," Dumbledore said, still not looking at him. "None of our other options were viable." "But Snape?" "That's Professor Snape to you, Potter," the man in question scowled. "And I assure you I have no desire to do this either. But we must all make sacrifices for the greater good." Harry looked back at Sirius pleadingly. "Sorry, pup. I tried to come up with something better, but we really didn't have much choice. But for you and Snape, I want you to try to be civil to each other." "I will not coddle him, Black," Snape said. "I'm not asking you to, Snape. I'm just asking you to treat him like one of your own students. And Harry, give me a call on your mirror if he gives you any trouble." "You really want me to learn some arcane branch of magic I've never heard of from him?" Harry demanded. He looked around the room, but no one seemed ready to give. Turning back to Dumbledore, who still wouldn't look at him, his anger boiled over. "Look at me!" he yelled. Dumbledore's eyes met his in surprise. Bam! A stab of pain in his scar and a fresh flash of rage far stronger than his own made him squeeze his eyes shut. He felt like drawing his wand on the old man, but the feeling vanished in a moment. An awkward, relative silence filled the office. "Harry, I think it's best if you return to your common room. Now," Dumbledore said in a voice that had lost all of its joviality. Harry considered protesting, but thought better of it and stood up. "Potter," Snape snapped at him, "I expect you in my office immediately following supper on Monday and Wednesday evenings. If anyone asks, you're taking remedial potions lessons. Merlin knows you could use those too." "Yes, sir," Harry grumbled. Harry was in a bad mood after that, but it lifted when Hermione announced that she had once again made the executive decision for the core of the DA, herself, Harry, and the Weasleys, to meet a half hour before their scheduled meeting time. Though initially resistant, Harry and the others were receptive to her idea when she told them her rationale was to teach them new spells she had invented. "This ought to be good," Ginny said. "Harry had lots of good things to say about the ones you taught him for the tournament last year." "Yeah, used 2 of them on you-know-who, didn't he?" Ron added. "Well, Cedric used 1 too, but yeah," Harry confirmed. Hermione frowned a little. "Yes," she said. "To be honest, I'm a little uncertain whom to teach these spells to. Some of them worry me more than others. You know what they can do. I might teach some of them only to Harry, and others I might bring in Cedric and Cho or even the whole group. I hope you don't mind." "Well, as long as we get some cool spells of our own," Ginny said. "Yeah," Fred agreed. "We're the inner circle of the DA. That should count for something." Harry shuddered. "Ugh, can we not use that phrase talking about us?" Sorry, Harry," he said, turning redder than usual. "Anyway, whatever you call us, let's get started," Hermione cut in. It was time to really get down to business. "The spell I want to teach you today I call the Vertigo Hex. Harry, you're probably the most resistant to motion sickness. Would you mind demonstrating?" Sure," he said uncertainly, and stepped forward. "Thank you, Harry. Now, watch closely." She swirled her wand in a quick spiral and cast Labyrinthitis. A pale yellow beam struck Harry, and he immediately began wobbling dizzily. Well, it works." "As you can see, the hex induces dizziness to throw off an opponent's aim by disturbing the vestibular system of the inner ear." It was a nifty little spell, in her opinion, and the first that she figured out by thumbing through her parents' old medical textbooks. "It's relatively easy to dispel, but it is powerful. Now, I found that if you shake your head quickly, it dissipates faster." Harry did so and promptly fell over. Hermione winced. "But if you do, it gets worse before it gets better." "Yeah, I noticed," Harry groaned. "Sorry, Harry." "Still, could be useful," Ron said. "So how do we cast it?" "By order of the High Inquisitor of Hogwarts. All student organizations, societies, teams, groups, and clubs are henceforth disbanded. An organization, society, team, group, or club is hereby defined as a regular meeting of 3 or more students. Permission to reform may be sought from the High Inquisitor, Professor Umbridge. No student organization, society, team, group, or club may exist without the knowledge and approval of the High Inquisitor. Any student found to have formed or to belong to an organization, society, team, group, or club that has not been approved by the High Inquisitor will be expelled. The above is in accordance with Educational Decree No. 25, signed by Dolores Jane Umbridge, High Inquisitor. The sign appeared on the Gryffindor notice board on Monday morning to general horror.
"This is terrible!"
Angelina Johnson yelled.
"I'll say," Hermione said. "How did she know?" "What? How did who know what?"
Hermione looked at Angelina in confusion, then checked that there were no non-members standing nearby and whispered,
"How did Umbridge know about the D.A.?" "Huh? What are you talking about?" "What are you talking about?"
"What are all of you talking about?" a new voice demanded. It was Ron, with Harry by his side, along with more people who were rapidly congregating around the notice board.
"Umbridge disbanded the Quidditch team!"
Angelina wailed. "What?"
"She disbanded all student organizations," Hermione clarified. "We have to ask her permission to reform them."
"Bloody hell!" Harry said. He stepped up and read the notice. He started shaking with anger, his hands clenching into fists. "This can't be coincidence. She knows."
"But we've got the contract," Ron said. "How does she know?" "I don't know, but she must," Hermione said.
"She's here to discredit me and Dumbledore and stop him from building an army," Harry said. "None of the regular clubs are a threat to her. It's got to be because of the D.A."
"Do you reckon someone will come down to breakfast all spotty?" Ron said. "If they broke the contract," Hermione started, then froze. "I'll be right back." She ran up the stairs back to her dorm and took the D.A. contract from her stash of papers. Like her notes on the war effort and the math magician's map, she had disguised it as arithmancy notes, so she wasn't worried about it being discovered, and a quick look at the real document gave her the answer. "No one in the D.A. told," she informed her friends when she reached the common room again. "I charmed the contract to write their names in red if they did, and no one was highlighted. She must have found out some other way." "Ah, such a chore," Alicia Spinnet said. Half the tower was gathered around the notice board by now. "You know, Cedric, Roger and I will have to ask permission to reform our arithmancy study group." "Your study group? Oh, crud! I'll need permission for my study group, too," she realized. "Your study group?" Ron spoke up. "What study group?" "My Thursday study group with Greenglass and Davis. It's a regular meeting of 3 students, and I don't think Umbridge will be in a mood to let it slide because it's informal. She might even say no, just to spite me." "Oh, well, that's not too bad," Ron said. "Why do you start a study group with a couple of Slytherins anyway?" "Slytherins aren't all bad, Ron." "They've been pretty shirty this year, and either way, is a study group with a couple of Slytherins that big a deal?" "I've been trying to be friendly and reach out to the other houses, remember? And I owe it to them after they took a chance working with me." "Well, I wouldn't worry too much," Angelina assured her. "If they ask her, I think she'll probably do it. She seems to like Slytherins."
"I still don't get how she knew," Harry said. "No one could have written home about it, could they?"
"No, not to anyone who didn't already know. So you could write to your parents about it," Hermione pointed out to the Weasleys. "But we agreed on no letters because they could be intercepted. You don't think they told, do you?"
"Nah," Fred answered. "Percy would, but Mum and Dad are smart enough not to tell him. I could maybe see Sirius getting drunk and telling some woman," Harry conceded. It was possible, but it didn't ring true. Sirius had been keeping the secrets of the Order just fine. Hermione might have considered Hagrid a possibility for the same reason, but he still wasn't back from wherever he went.
"I don't know, Harry," she said. "I think it was most likely someone in the school did it. If no one on the contract told, Then someone must have let it slip before we drew up the contract. Or, Harry said, coming to a realization, or they never signed the contract. But who didn't? Seamus never signed, remember? He said. We told him before we wrote the contract, but he didn't want to join. That git! Ron yelled, and he turned and ran up the stairs. Finnegan! Ron! Harry followed him. Ron, Harry, wait! Hermione rushed up after them. She reached the boys' dorm to find the place rapidly descending into chaos. Seamus, who had clearly been having a lie-in till the last minute to head down for breakfast, was running from an angry Ron while Harry tried to hold Ron back. Why'd you do it, Finnegan? Ron yelled as he tried to take a swing at him. Thought you'd get Harry back for ragging on your mum, did you? Ron, stop! Hermione yelled, grabbing onto him. Ron, wait. Don't you think we should ask him if he did it? Harry said. Yeah, good idea, Seamus said. Tell me what the bloody hell I'm supposed to have done. You told Umbridge about our defense club, Ron bellowed. Ron, Hermione said. Bugger off, Weasley. Why would I tell that bitch anything? Seamus demanded. Hermione sighed exasperatedly. Ronald, let me explain it to him. Seamus, Umbridge put up a notice today disbanding all the student organizations. They all have to be reapproved by her. We think it's because she found out about our defense group and wants to stop it. We're pretty sure no one in the group told, and we're also pretty sure you're the only other person in the school who knew. That was true. She hadn't even told Septima so far, not wanting to put extra pressure on her with Umbridge breathing down her neck. And I doubt you would have told Umbridge, but if you told someone else who told her... I didn't tell anyone about your stupid club, he cut in. Weasley told me to keep my mouth shut or else, don't you know? Merlin's beard, it's like you've all gone balmy. What if you're lying? Ron said. Ron, chill, Harry said, before Hermione could chastise him again. 'Cause I knew you'd go nutters on me like this, Seamus said. I don't know, Harry, Ron said. Say, Hermione, what if we make him sign the contract? Ron, I'm not going to make anyone sign the contract, and it wouldn't register anything from before he signed anyway. What contract? Seamus asked. Harry and Hermione glared at Ron. Oops, the redhead muttered. Hermione rolled her eyes and turned to the Irish boy. Seamus, I have an actual serious question for you. Are you worried about failing your owl in defense? She thought she saw a flicker of worry across the boy's face, but he answered, not really. I mean, if everyone flunks, they'll grade it on a curve, won't they? Maybe, but what if half the class gets secret training that the other half doesn't? Seamus's face fell. Are you trying to get me to join your club? Yes, as a matter of fact. This club is practicing spells that we'll need for our owl that we aren't learning in class. And before you ask, there's no requirement that you have to believe Harry about Voldemort to join. There's no requirement that you even have to like Harry. Harry and I are teaching it together, so you don't even have to work with him if you don't want to. All you'd be there for is passing your exams. What's the catch, Granger? He said shrewdly. The catch is that if we let you in on where and when the meetings are, you could tell someone else where to find us, so you have to sign a magical contract not to tell. Bugger that. I'm not signing a magical contract for you lot. Me ma'am didn't even want me associating with Potter. Ron and Harry bristled, but Hermione waved them back. You won't even read it? She pressed on, keeping her voice calm. Susan Bones signed, and her aunt works for the ministry. She conveniently left out that Susan's aunt wasn't fond of the minister. She did? Seamus said in surprise. Yes, she did. And if you're worried about Harry, I'm the one who wrote the contract, not him. Seamus sighed heavily and glanced at a still intimidating Ron. Well, I guess I can take a look. Thank you, Seamus, Hermione said. She pulled what appeared to be a sheet of notes from her robes and tapped her wand to it, saying, Now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of their country. She'd thought something a little weightier than her usual motto was called for here. Seamus stared as the writing appeared. Dumbledore's army? Are you serious? It was Ginny's idea, Hermione said. I wanted to call it the Defense Association. You really want me to sign that? No one will ever see it. We have as much interest in keeping it a secret as you. Do you want to pass your owl or not?" Seamus grumbled a lot, but he read over the contract and found it wasn't too onerous, and despite his leeriness around Harry, Hermione correctly surmised that even he didn't like Umbridge much. "All right," he decided, "but just to pass me owl, you hear?" He signed the contract. "Good, that's one less security flaw," Hermione thought. "Thank you very much, Seamus." "Yeah, well, you owe me one," he said. And then he twigged on something else. "Wait a minute. All student organizations? Does that mean no more Quidditch?" "She wouldn't reform the team?" Harry said in horror. "But I didn't even say a word to her." "I know," Angelina said. "She reformed all the others, didn't she?" Hermione asked. She knew Umbridge had reconstituted the Slytherin Quidditch team already. Draco Malfoy had been boasting about it earlier. She remembered because Harry, Ron, and Neville narrowly avoided detention with Snape when Malfoy said something that Neville took as a slight against his parents. "Yeah, Slytherin, Ravenclaw, and Hufflepuff all got their teams back today." "What's her problem?" Harry said. "Has she just got it in for Gryffindor?" Angelina shook her head. "Remember what she said when you got detention? She told me she had concerns about the composition of the team. She's trying to make me boot you from the team, Harry." "No, you can't. Harry makes the whole team." "You can't get rid of him." I know," Angelina yelled over her teammates. "You can tell we don't want to get rid of you, Harry. I told Umbridge we didn't have anyone even close to your level to replace you with. No offense, Ginny, but she just said she needed more time to think it over." "Do you think she'll do it?" Harry asked. "I don't know. Look, Harry, I really don't want to take you off the team, especially seeing as it's not your fault, this time. But if Umbridge doesn't let up within a week or so, I'll have to. We need time to practice before the first match." "Oh, well, that's just great," Harry groaned. "Sorry, Harry, but look on the bright side. It's not like it can get much worse." He glared at her. "Sure it can. I've got remedial potions with Snape after dinner." "Remedial potions?" Angelina gasped. "Good Lord, how did that happen? That's cruel and unusual."
"Yeah, tell me about it."
The remedial potions, so far as Hermione could tell, did not go well. Harry had come back from his occlumency lesson with Snape pale, nursing a headache, his scar inflamed, somehow, and even more irritable than usual. He didn't really explain what the whole occlumency thing was all about. He wasn't in the mood to talk much at all, in fact. But he did relay to them that somehow, in the course of the lesson, he had realized that the dark corridor he had been dreaming about was actually the corridor that led to the Department of Mysteries in the Ministry. That led to a lively discussion of why he was dreaming about that corridor, and what it meant, which ultimately concluded next to nothing, although Harry was of the opinion that whatever weapon Voldemort wanted was in there. That was plausible, but they had no evidence. Hermione still didn't really understand what occlumency was. No one had clearly explained it to her beyond the fact that it was some kind of mental discipline, and it would help Harry block out the visions he was getting from Voldemort. It was apparently an obscure art, not widely practiced, and even less widely written about, so she couldn't easily learn it from the library. She felt a little jealous of Harry for having the opportunity, but mostly confused and worried for him, especially with Professor Snape teaching him. It was definitely odd. Dumbledore and Sirius, of all people, wanted Harry to learn a new type of magic from Snape? Because of his visions? That was one of the weirder things she'd seen in the magical world, and she'd seen a lot. She could feel for him. She still didn't understand why Dumbledore was having so little to do with him this year. It had to be very frustrating. Meanwhile, taking Alicia's advice, Hermione approached Daphne Greengrass and Tracy Davis before going to Umbridge to reform their study group, which they decided to do first thing the next morning. Umbridge didn't exactly have office hours, but she could usually be found there when it wasn't class or meal times, so they figured right before first class would be a good time to catch her. "Come in," the saccharine voice called when Hermione knocked on the door. The three girls walked in and couldn't help but stare at the decor. So much pink, Hermione thought. She wasn't so much of a girly girl herself, but she thought even Lavender would overdose on pink in this room. And really fluffy kittens? The walls were covered with pictures of them. Hermione wasn't sure what that said about Umbridge that she could have an office like this and be so cruel, or have an office like this at all, for that matter. Maybe they could get her sacked for being crazy. If only. "Miss Granger," Umbridge said sharply before she noticed the other two and became curious. "And Miss Greenglass and Miss Davis, what brings you to my office today?" Greengrass stepped forward. Umbridge seemed to like her best, and they agreed she should be their spokeswoman. "Professor, we have a study group we'd like to ask your permission to restart." "A study group?" Umbridge said in surprise, looking them over. "I was not aware of any study group involving your two houses." "It was a very recent thing, Professor. We've only been meeting the past few weeks. It's been very informal, really." "However, it is a meeting of 3 students, ma'am," Hermione added. "So under Educational Decree 25, we need your authorization to continue it." Naturally, Umbridge gave her a suspicious look, but they were clearly following the rule to the letter, so there was nothing she could say. What was it that Orwell said? Hermione thought. Keep the small rules, and you can break the big ones, or something like that. "I see," Umbridge said. "And what is the subject of this study group, Miss Greengrass?" "Whatever we've been working on at the time, ma'am." They had decided it would be best not to limit it. "Although the majority of the time we've been helping Granger with charms, and she's been helping us with arithmancy." Umbridge gave Hermione a suspicious look. "And what program are you using for the arithmancy studies?" "The 5th-year curriculum, of course, ma'am," Hermione said. "Including the practical exercises?" "To the extent we can in the library. Those are included in the curriculum set by the Wizarding Examinations Authority, Professor." Umbridge did her level best to find some fault with the group. She asked them where and when their meetings were. Did they have any other members? Were they planning to bring in any? Did they have any membership requirements? But they didn't say anything that she could use to deny them, and why would they? It really was just a study group. If it had been mostly Gryffindors, she might still have used her arbitrary power to deny it, but she did seem to like the Slytherins, so she went ahead and wrote up their approval just in time for them to get to class. "Did you ask her about the Gryffindor team while you were there?" Angelina asked Hermione at lunch. "I'm sorry, Angelina. It didn't seem like the time with Greengrass and Davis there. Plus, I didn't want to jeopardize our chances in front of them by bringing up what was sure to be a sore topic." "Well, that's all well and good for you," she huffed. "I'm still sitting on a Quidditch team that can't play. You ought to do something for your house." Hermione rolled her eyes. This wasn't her job. "Look, if you think it will help, which I doubt, I'll speak to her about it, but why don't you just go to Professor McGonagall?" she said. "I did. Umbridge just said the same thing to her. She needed to think about it some more." "She's probably not going to bend, you know," Hermione concluded. "To hear Professor Vector tell it, Umbridge will manipulate any rule she has to get what she wants, and right now she wants to stick it to Harry." "So you just want me to quit the team?" Harry snapped at her. No, Harry, I don't want you to. I'm just saying that Umbridge can probably push harder than you can." "So we'll have to play without our best player," Angelina grumbled. "Great." "I'm sorry, Angelina. Sometimes politics screws you over like that. We're fighting it the best we can, at least. You know," Hermione had a thought, "in the Muggle world, if a school did something this blatantly unfair, and if people cared enough about it, they'd write letters to the editor in the newspaper, or write to the Board of Governors." "But Fudge is controlling the Daily Prophet," Harry said. "They won't print any letters." "They don't have to, but Fudge still has to worry about public opinion. If enough parents write in to complain, someone will notice." You know, that could be a pretty good idea, Hermione," George said. "We could write all over, too. Without the Gryffindor team, the professional teams will lose half their recruiting season." "That's right," Angelina said. "I didn't even think of that. All the professional teams will be annoyed, and that's a lot of money." "Yeah, but what if you-know-who in a cardigan intercepts our mail?" Fred asked. Harry snorted at the nickname,
then was a little surprised that Fred was being the practical one here. She considered the problem for a minute.
Write the letters anyway, she decided. It'll look suspicious if she doesn't see anything. Her finding out isn't the problem. It's getting the messages through. I have a couple of people I can contact without fear of interception who can spread the word if all else fails.
She was mainly thinking of Sirius and Mr. Weasley, since she could send Dobby to Grimmauld Place. Sirius certainly had the clout to contact all the professional teams.
You know, that just might work, Angelina agreed. Let's do it. Everyone spread the word to the rest of Gryffindor, and maybe Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff if they'll go for it.
Hermione smiled. Umbridge may have foiled her direct efforts, but there were still ways for the people to make their voice known in this society. As it happened, Hermione decided to call Harry alone to come to the Room of Requirement early that Saturday night. Part of her motive was to cheer him up after the past week, but she also had more practical considerations.
I only wanted to share this spell with you, at least to start with, she told him. That's both because it's a powerful and dangerous curse, and because, well, I thought it would be fitting it was mostly your spell.
Why? Harry said in confusion. Why not tell the others?
You can if you want, but I thought you should see it.
She spun around and flourished her wand.
Fulmina!
Suddenly, with a loud crack like a whip, but louder, a bolt of lightning shot from her wand and leapt 10 feet through the air before dissipating. Whoa, Harry said, flinching back.
Yes, I know. I just thought if you wanted lightning to be your thing, with the scar, you know. There are other spells that do the same thing, of course, but with my knowledge of electromagnetism, I made some improvements.
Harry blushed and ruffled his hair self-consciously. I never really thought about it that way. So, it's dangerous?
It's a curse, Harry. Of course it's dangerous. It shouldn't kill a healthy adult, but it's still too much to do human trials. The main thing is it packs a bigger punch than Stupefy, and it's faster. But on the other hand, its effective range is pretty short, close quarters only.
That wasn't ideal, but he quickly made his decision. Well, it still would have been useful last June. Let's do it. The lightning curse was harder than a lot of the other curses she had taught him, but Harry was a quick study, and she managed to get him passable in it before the rest of the DA arrived.
Why do we call it the DA? She wondered idly. That's what everyone's calling it, but isn't the kind of redundant?
Anyway, the full DA assembled, including Padma and Seamus. There were 23 of them now, although Seamus didn't look very happy to be there. Actually, quite a few of them looked nervous and were chatting quietly about the new educational decree. Hermione decided to start by drawing the lines clearly.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, I know this new educational decree has a lot of us worried, she told the group. It worries me, to be honest, not least because I don't know how Umbridge found out about us. And I want to be clear on this. By being here tonight, we are all technically committing an expellable offense. So if any of you want to back out, you should leave now. But you'll still be bound by the contract not to talk about the group.
She looked around. There were some fearful looks and nervous laughter, but no one made a move to leave. Not even Seamus.
Good, she said. I'm glad you still came. It shows that you understand how serious Umbridge's willful lack of teaching is.
And really, would they actually expel 23 students? No, probably just the leaders, her and Harry.
So, since we're throwing ourselves headfirst into rule-breaking, let's get to it. Harry?
Harry stepped forward. So, tonight is about basic incapacitation spells. Leg locker, jelly legs, body bind, and so forth. If we have time, I want to work up to the impediment jinx. You don't want to rely on them too much because they're easy to cancel, and dark wizards certainly won't hold back like that, but... Yeah, because dark wizards are such a big threat, Seamus interrupted. Silence fell. People looked back and forth between him and Harry. Are you going to work with us tonight, or not, Finnegan? Harry asked, his voice hard. Hermione said I could come. Isn't she supposed to be teaching too?
Yes, and I'll be happy to help you once we get started, she said. But I would urge you to listen to what he has to say.
I don't need to listen to a nutter like Potter. That was all he got out before half the DA shouted him down.
All right, enough, enough! Hermione shushed them. That's enough. We don't all have to agree here. We're just here to study for our exam, right? They reluctantly nodded. I just have one question for you, Seamus. You do remember, don't you, that the Ministry does admit that Barty Crouch Jr. is still on the loose? That's right, Cedric spoke up. I may not have seen you-know-who, but I definitely fought Crouch. He waved his mechanical arm for emphasis. Well, yeah, Seamus agreed. So there are still dark wizards out there, Hermione said. You ought to prepare to defend yourself against them. I'll work with you if you want to steer clear of Harry. Seamus grumbled a little. What was that? She asked. I said, do you even duel? I thought you were all about numbers and stuff. She glared at him. You may not like Harry, Seamus, but you have to admit, he cleaned up in the Triwizard Tournament, and I was the one who trained him as much as I could last year. It's true, Cedric agreed. She taught me and Harry spells that saved us in June. Or we could just try a practice duel, Hermione said, innocently. Seamus arched an eyebrow. As much as he didn't want to be there, it seemed he was up for the challenge. The rest of the DA backed away from them, and Hermione reached for her wand. But when she laid her hand on the handle, she stopped. Something didn't feel quite right. She had done a little bit of dueling this year, but this was her first, well, not quite an honor duel, but something close to it. Her first since she bought her second wand. The wand, Ollivander said, was a duelist's wand. It was almost like it was calling to her. She didn't believe Ollivander's line that wands had minds of their own, but even so, it didn't feel right to neglect it at a time like this. She drew her handsome red oak wand instead, and held it in her left hand. Seamus didn't seem to notice anything out of place. She thought she heard Harry start to say something, but she turned and winked at him to stop him. At a motion from her, Harry counted them off, and they dueled. Not having ever dueled left-handed before, Hermione was slow and clumsy. Not nearly as bad as most people would be left-handed, but her aim was off, her wand motions were sluggish, and her spells occasionally fizzled. On the other hand, she knew quite a few more spells than Seamus, even without dipping too deep into her personal creations, including a basic shield charm that could hold his hexes off for a few moments and give her time to think. She knew her style needed some work. She had a few staple hexes and her shield charm that she could automatically cast while she was dodging or thinking about what stronger spells she could throw at him. She couldn't really throw a chain of creative spells, and she was stuck on the defensive, barely holding off Seamus's attacks and unable to get in many of her own. Ready to give up, Granger? Seamus smirked. Hermione smiled. She'd been waiting to use this one. I admit it, she said between spells. You are better than I am. Seamus's eyes narrowed. Then why are you smiling? Because I know something you don't know. And what is that? I am not left-handed. And with a flourish, she swapped her wand to her right hand and started casting with nearly twice the speed and accuracy as before. Seamus's eyes widened, and he was so caught off guard that she dispatched him with just a few spells. The DA stared in amazement. Some applauded. Some started to ridicule Seamus, but Hermione graciously helped him up. He looked pretty chagrined, but she thought she had earned his, albeit grudging, respect. So, about that teaching, he said. Dolores Umbridge felt confusion more than anything else as she entered the ministry on Monday morning. She had been all set for another perfectly dreadful day as a teacher when she received an urgent owl from Cornelius asking if she could please come up and see him before her classes started to discuss their plans. Dolores thought their plans were pretty clear and didn't see what could have gone wrong. Perhaps it was good news. Perhaps he had found a new angle to take down Dumbledore. Wouldn't that be nice? But whatever it was, she went down to London. Truth be told, it was good to get out of that castle for a little while. Cornelius didn't look uncommonly happy when she reached his office, so it wasn't likely to be good news. But it didn't look especially bad, either. He just had that same beleaguered look he'd had since Dumbledore had started his scheme in June. Terribly sorry to pull you away from your breakfast, Dolores, he said as she took her seat. Toast? Thank you, Cornelius, she said, taking a slice.
This was what she liked so much about her boss. He was polite, considerate, and knew how to treat his faithful right. "I know you are very busy, so I'll get right to it," he said. "I understand that with the latest educational decree, you have delayed in reforming the Gryffindor Quidditch team." Huh? Well, that wasn't what she expected.
Yes, I've held off on reforming it."
And was there a particular reason you did so when you reformed the other teams immediately?
Certainly. I'm hoping to pressure McGonagall and the team captain to let Potter go. I think they'll do it before the first match, and then I can use letting him back on the team as a bargaining chip. If he'll listen to reason, of course.
Aha. Cornelius nodded knowingly and cracked a bit of a smile. I see. That's a very clever idea, Dolores. Very clever. Which is why I'm so sorry I have to tell you to drop it.
What? Cornelius, why on earth?
Cornelius dropped a stack of letters on his desk. I'm afraid you've attracted a bit too much attention with this one. These are all the letters that Barnabas Cuff received in the past week saying that it's unfair of you to single out one team for extra scrutiny. I kept them out of print, of course, but I can't ignore them. Dolores looked at the stack with wide eyes. She flipped through a couple of them. Some were polite. Some were angry. Some were most definitely from parents and not students. This was worrying. She'd intercepted more than a few letters going out from the school complaining about the Quidditch team, and while she didn't doubt some had slipped through, she didn't think there would be enough for such a large response. Lovely, aren't they? Cornelius said sarcastically. They're not just from students, or even parents, for that matter. I've got half the professional teams complaining about this cutting into their recruitment.
The professional teams?
Yep, you can guess what they're saying. No good reason, hurting recruitment, harmless national pastime. They're not happy. You can see why we have to back off on this one. This was bad. Potter or someone had outflanked her. Time for damage control. In her sweetest voice, she said,
I'm terribly sorry I caused this much trouble, Cornelius. I had no idea this would go so far. But even so, I think if you can buy me another week, I can make McGonagall break.
I wish I could, Dolores, but you know how fast news travels in this country, and not just through the papers. The Quidditch teams have their own mouthpieces. We'd be playing a risky game, even if McGonagall doesn't know about this campaign, and knowing her, she probably does, and she'll stand her ground. Lovely idea, Dolores, but you'll have to get to Potter some other way. Some other way. Well, if that was the way she had to play the game, she'd damn well play it. She'd bloody well find another way.
Of course, Cornelius,
she said, still forcing a smile.
I'm sure I can work something out. I'll handle the paperwork this morning.
Jolly good, then. And don't worry, we'll get them in the end. Dolores returned to Hogwarts in a dark mood. As loath as she was to admit it, she quietly told McGonagall before the first class that she was giving permission to reform the team, to which she graciously thanked her for her change of heart. Naturally, the whole school knew by lunch, and the Gryffindors were obnoxiously patting each other on the back over it. Dolores didn't know exactly how her plan had fallen apart, but she had a strong suspicion that Potter and his co-conspirators were smack in the middle of it. To add insult to injury, Potter was so happy in her class that she couldn't make him step out of line no matter how much she needled him. And she really didn't like the smug look that Mudblood Granger was giving her.